We may be seated. We're going to invite our teenagers from the Jewish Community Center of Harrison forward to lead us in singing Oseh Shalom. And as we sing, I invite you to sing with us. So we'll invite all of the teenagers from JCCH, and that includes you guys, of course. And Ohad too. Are they coming? Yeah. All right. They're on their way. All right, let's start. Yeah. Oseh Shalom Bimroma, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimroma, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'imru Amen. Ya'aseh Shalom, Ya'aseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh Shalom, Ya'aseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh Shalom, Ya'aseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh Shalom, Ya'aseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh Shalom, Ya'aseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Let's sing that one more time now with our JCCH teens. Come on up, guys. Oseh Shalom Bimroma, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'imru Amen. Ya'aseh Shalom, Ya'aseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh Shalom, Ya'aseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Our teens are supporting us from their seats. Thank you guys for singing. We can, of course, I'll be seated. We'll continue now with the candle processional.
"6 million died, more than 1/3 of the Jewish population of the world. The whole world stood by, silent. 6 million died. We must not forget them. Their death shall not be in vain. This shall never happen again. In our tradition, we light a yahrzeit candle for the death of our loved ones. Let us light 6 candles, one for each million. While the 6 candles burn in memory of our loved ones, let us read responsively. First candle, in the memory of helpless infants, children and teenagers who were cut down like young trees before their time, before they had a chance to experience life, we shall not forget.
In memory of all the mothers who died with their children in their arms, we shall not forget. Third candle, in memory of all mothers and fathers who were cruelly separated from their families, we shall not forget. That's not going to work. There you go. In memory of all scholars, teachers, and rabbis who were the first to be seized, we shall not forget.
The fifth candle, in memories of the heroes of the resistance who fought the Nazis, so few against so many, we shall not forget. Sixth candle, in memory of the martyrs who gave their lives to help their brothers under the Nazis, we shall not forget.
Shalom Aleichem. Shalom. The word Shalom Aleichem may be familiar to us. It's the way we greet Shabbat. And although tonight is not Shabbat, it is an appropriate greeting of peace. Shalom Aleichem means peace unto you. Tonight we have the opportunity to welcome each other with shalom, to extend that blessing of shalom to each other, and for the first time in more than 2 years, sit together, brothers and sisters. Hi, everyone. I'm Marcos Askenazi. I'm the cantor of the Jewish Community Center of Harrison, alongside Rabbi Howard Goldsmith and Cantor Meredith Stone of Congregation Emanu-el, Rabbi Daniel Groper and Cantor Melanie Cooperman of Community Synagogue of Rye, and Rabbi Ben Goldberg and Cantor Alexis Sklar of Congregation KTI. On the bima, you'll notice empty chairs. Each one of those chairs represents 1 million souls. While we fill our sanctuary tonight, we remember the chairs that have sat permanently empty. We recall our past and preserve hope for the future, a hope that has sustained our people for thousands of years. So on behalf of the Yom Hashoah Committee, the staff of all of our synagogues, the maintenance team here, I welcome you to our annual Yom Hashoah commemoration. We'll call on Mona Clapper now for a reading.
My parents were very different people, and in kind handled the telling of this part of their history in uniquely different ways. My mother spoke freely, often, and on some level casually about her experiences before it was trendy, before there was a Schindler's List or Shoah Foundation or a Holocaust Museum in DC, New York, or countless other cities. She dealt with her trauma in a way that was consistent with her extroverted personality. My father, on the other hand, was an introvert. He wasn't much of a talker to begin with, and he certainly wasn't going to be sharing these experiences nonchalantly. But the truth was, he didn't have to speak because he gave testimony every single night as he screamed in his sleep, reliving the nightmare on a daily basis. As children, it was terrifying, but you got used to it and you understood. My mother, Erzsika, or Elizabeth Braun, was born in 1926 in Maltaselka, Hungary, where, she would remind us, Tony Curtis's parents came from. And you know, Jamie is doing a lot of work in Maltaselka. She put a museum together there. A small village where her father farmed. One of 9 children, she talked about an idyllic childhood filled with caring parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and siblings. My father, Harry Klein, was born in 1922 in Munkac, a city that was in Czechoslovakia but later became part of Hungary. One of 8 children, his father owned the Home Depot of Munkac, a building supply company that sold both wholesale and retail, as well as owning a large building that housed the business and other stores and apartments for rent. Both my parents are survivors of Auschwitz, and they lost their parents and most of their siblings in the Holocaust. As Hungarian Jews, they were lucky. They were not rounded up into the ghettos until 1944. The dehumanization starts in the ghetto, but the horror escalates in the freight trains that took them both to Auschwitz. They both vividly recount the nightmare. Crammed into a hot cattle car with no window, barely any air to breathe, no room to move, let alone sit, screaming children, and a bucket for a toilet for 5 days. At the beginning, my mother says everyone was courteous. She let older people and pregnant ladies sit on her suitcase, but as the journey gets longer and more desperate, she becomes selfish too. She finally arrives at Auschwitz. My mother heard her aunt call her name, but she never found her aunt. Instead, she found her aunt's niece, Frida, a few years older, taller, and braver. As they approached Dr. Mengele, Frida pulled my mother to her side, and she never left her side, staying together until the end of the war. Both my parents speak of the trauma of having their heads shaved. My mother couldn't recognize Frida, who was standing next to her. In my father's own words, "We were taken to wooden barracks. Was this the showers? There were about 1,000 people in one barrack. We were then taken to the barbers who shaved our heads. After our heads were shaved, we were told we had to undress completely. Our clothing and anything else we had was thrown into a pile. I was heartbroken that I had to throw away my beautiful clothes. I somehow kept my shoes and a penknife. 2 Jewish prisoners who were guards stood and watched that we did not take anything for ourselves. We were taken to the showers. Everyone looked like a monkey. You couldn't recognize anyone, including yourself. You were completely changed. On the way to the shower, we were completely naked and walked by the women prisoners who were in the camp for a while. They did not see that we were naked. They only wanted to know what country and city we were from and if we knew any of their family members." Memories of seeing the barracks for the first time are associated not only with the shock of realizing that 10 people would be sleeping in a wood bunk, no straw, no mattresses, sharing one blanket, 5 on one side, 5 on the other side like sardines, but also with the screaming and threats of the Jewish prison wardens, or kapos, who were in charge. My mother talks about Alice, a Czech woman with red hair who had been in Auschwitz for 4 or 5 years. With a whip in her hand, she screamed, telling them to be quiet and that if you don't listen, you will wind up there, pointing to the smoke coming out of the crematorium. When the girls asked, crying, "Where are the mothers who had young children?" Alice said, "If a mother had held her child's hand, they're probably both dead. If she didn't, the mother may be okay." My father remembered a very fat capo came and took us to our wooden barracks. Every word out of his mouth was a yell or a scream. The capo stopped us from fighting and stood in the middle of the barracks explaining that talk is silver, but silence is golden. This saying was posted in the middle of the barracks, and it was in German. The food was basically inedible. My mother recalls the dirt, probably from unwashed potatoes, in the soups crunching on her teeth. My father recalls when lunch was served. We formed a single line, and the first 100 people were served. They then ran out of metal plates. You had to eat like a pig. There was no spoon or fork. The food was thick soup. The person in front of you would eat, leave the metal plate on the floor, and you would have your turn to eat. Then they would leave your plate on the floor, and so on. 100 metal plates to feed 1,000 people. In spite of the fact that I had not eaten for 24 hours, I could not swallow the gray bread. On the second day, I was so hungry, I tried to eat the terrible seaweed-like soup. As soon as the smell of the soup hit my nose, I was unable to eat. At the same time, I saw other people eating the soup and realized that 3 days ago, they also would not have looked at the stuff. I tried to take the soup to a small corner and tried to eat, but I couldn't. The hunger was not strong enough. I emptied my plate. After the 3rd day, my small supply of bread was gone, and I forced myself to eat. As with the others, it wasn't so bad on the 4th day. You realized that you either ate what was thrown at you or you starved. The food became very good. It is not hard to understand the central role food played in my parents' home. Excessive on every level, very high quality, and served in abundance. There are so many vivid, heartbreaking stories to tell, but I wanted to share just a bit more about my mother's experience and fate and choice. On Tisha B'Av, 1944, my mother was among 800 women chosen in a group. They expected to be exterminated. They could see the gas chambers, and they knew that the Germans chose Jewish holidays to add an extra dose of bitterness. Instead, to their surprise, they were taken on a train to Landsberg, a subcamp of Dachau. The accommodations were better. The beds had straw. The food was better. My mother was there from August 1944 to April 1945, and almost like a miracle, in the last few weeks, they needed people to do office work, and she was chosen. The German girls working in the office let my mother and another woman take showers, shared their food, helped them get stronger. This was critical when they did their 10-day walk to Dachau. And it was in Dachau that my mother actually did see the interior of a gas chamber. Sometimes she thought it was a dream that didn't really happen, but in fact it did, and she was there with the six women that formed their small family. 200 women were in the gas chamber, and they started banging on the doors, and to their complete shock, the doors opened and they ran out. The ground in front of them was covered with leaflets. She didn't know if it were the British troops, which is her story, or the American troops, which was her friend's story, who flew over and sent a message to the Germans. But the Germans ran, at least for that moment. This was nearing the end of the war. There was yet another walk and another camp, but she was liberated by American soldiers from Buchberg. And her entire group of 6 women who came together as a family all survived. Final thoughts. As the daughter of Holocaust survivors, the paradox you grapple with is whether the person that you know is the person that they would have been had it not been for the Holocaust. If this defining experience didn't happen to my parents, who would they have been? What is their true DNA? I am not a mental health professional, but when I put a contemporary lens on the trauma and subsequent treatment of Holocaust survivors, it's a miracle that any of them had functioning, fulfilling lives filled with family, friends, celebration, successes, and simchas. And despite all that trauma, I am grateful for the warm, supportive family that nurtured me and selflessly gave me everything they could to prepare me for the rich and fruitful life that I have had.
Ashray Good evening, everyone. I'm Larry Rudkovsky, a member of the Yom Hashoah Commemoration Service Committee. We thank the JCCH for hosting this evening's program and the 3 other synagogues that have supported this tradition now in its 3rd decade. I've been asked to introduce you to the Forum for Dialogue, and then we'll watch a video prepared by the Forum especially for this evening's service. The history of the Polish nation and the Jews is complex, particularly recognizing the occasion of this evening's service. The Forum, a Warsaw-based not-for-profit, was founded in 2003 and is dedicated to raising the awareness of the history of the Jews in Poland, including the way it was conveyed to descendants of Polish Jews. They do this by engaging in dialogue, nothing more, nothing less, talking with one another. They reach out in a number of ways through study trips to Poland, education of young Poles, through the Forum's School of Dialogue, sponsorship of the Leaders of Dialogue program, Polish-Jewish exchange programs, and many other ways. Before we launch the video, the committee would also like to thank all of those at the Forum who worked so hard, particularly at this time, on this presentation, and if you'll permit me to mention just a few. Andrzej Farzwarny, the president of the Forum, Susanna Razik, the vice president of the Forum, Olga Kazmarek, the director general, and especially Hanna Gaspar-Arzik, the project coordinator who really put this all together. You can learn much more about the Forum by visiting their website at dialogue.org.pl. PL stands for Poland. And we invite you to explore and find out more about what the Forum is doing. Cantor Marcos, might we roll the video?
Hello, my name is Olga Kaczmarek and I'm the Director General of Forum for Dialogue. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. According to cautious estimates, there are about 1,200 Jewish cemeteries in Poland, which is roughly the same as the United States. There are about 3,700 working synagogues in the US, compared to 27 now operating in Poland. Given also the presence of concentration and death camps on Polish territory during the war, it is no wonder that for many Jews, Poland is a Jewish cemetery and little else. But for some Jews in Poland and abroad, and some non-Jewish Poles, the country remains a place with an incredibly complicated and diverse Jewish heritage that needs protection and constant effort to ensure that this rich history does not fall into oblivion. This is where Forum for Dialogue steps in. Forum is the largest and oldest Polish nonprofit organization dedicated to Polish-Jewish dialogue. We support, empower, connect, and educate communities and individuals, aiming to write a new chapter in the book of Polish-Jewish relations. Forum's mission, based on 4 pillars of connections, activism, education, and expertise, is to reconnect modern Poland with Jews living all over the world. We achieve this through original programs run in small towns and rural areas of Poland, and through outreach to Jewish communities around the world. So what do we do? If you recall the contrast between the number of cemeteries and synagogues quoted a moment ago, you must surely realize that there are not enough Jews in Poland today to take care of the heritage left by those who perished and those who emigrated. It is, for the most part, up to non-Jewish Poles in cooperation with local Jewish communities to do the work of preservation, education, and protection of the memory of Jews in Poland. It is up to us to maintain the cemeteries and synagogue buildings that no longer serve a religious purpose. It is up to us to educate about the Jews from Poland who have left an important legacy within Polish literature and art, economy, industry, as well as politics and philosophy. It is also up to us to challenge Polish society to face the difficult history of Polish-Jewish coexistence, including anti-Semitism, anti-Jewish violence, and the impact of having the Holocaust happen on the occupied Polish territories. Jewish history in Poland is Polish history. And the fact that it has been ignored here for decades after the Second World War, purposefully erased by communist authorities, makes it a pressing issue. Because without the awareness of the contribution of Jews to Polish, well, everything, we continue to exist with a void, something missing, a void that cannot be filled. When I talk about the work of the Forum to International Audiences, I am often asked what made me interested and invested in it. It took me a while to come up with a reply that wouldn't boil down to hope to end anti-Semitism and an investment in Jewish history and heritage. Because of course my answer is much more personal than that. It is to do with a sense of loss and emptiness that I grew up with all my life. I spent most of my early years on the outskirts of a small town near Warsaw called Pruszków. Whenever I would go to the town's center, I was hit with an unexplainable feeling of something missing there, something painful and eerie, that left its mark on the town and its residents. And for the longest time, I could not put my finger on what it was. More than that, up until 20 years ago, in the absence of good motorways, any family journey through Poland would take us through a string of familiarly looking towns. Driving into one, going through little somewhat rundown streets, and then around what used to be a market square, with then perpendicular little streets going out, and then heading outside and onto another town like this. It was really only when I started studying cultural studies at the university and then took part in an ethnographic field research in the east of Poland, asking elderly residents of villages there about their memory of pre-war Jewish communities, that I understood the historical reality that I have always been surrounded by. The reality of Poland's urban space, history, culture, economy, language, and society as a whole being forever marked by the centuries of Jewish life here, and also by the fact that the Shoah largely happened here. It is my deep conviction that you can't understand Poland today without the grasp of the multifaceted impact and contribution of the Polish Jews, and the impact of the fact that so many of them have been murdered here, and so very few are here still. And yet, oddly, not everyone has been this privileged to have the resources and time to experience this gradual transformation that has brought me to Forum for Dialogue. With every step I took towards this work and mission, I collected around me a community of people who have experienced a version of this revelation or transformation, if you will. And the mission of the forum is, first, to create conditions for such transformations to happen to people, including young people, all over the country. And two, to support and network those who see the need to preserve and educate about the Jewish past, but are often alone in their efforts. Who are those people, you might ask? They come from all walks of life, including a mayor of a small village with a huge synagogue, a reformed anti-Semite who has dedicated his life to bringing back the memory of Jews of Orla, an EFL teacher in Minsk Mazowiecki, who was asked to host a group of Israeli students of her school and then discovered the town's rich Jewish history, which she has been preserving and sharing with local residents ever since. A construction worker from Radoshice, who has been finding fragments of Jewish tombstones and returning them to the local Jewish cemetery. Or activist and educator who collected an oral history of the Jews of Białowieża and led to a creation of a permanent commemoration of local victims of the Holocaust. Our Leaders of Dialogue network includes almost 100 such incredible people who we support with training, expertise, as well as grants and scholarships. Each year, we are adding new activists through the network, but there is still so much work to be done. There are 1,200 Jewish cemeteries in Poland, and I want to live in a world where each is taken care of by the local community who understands the Jewish history as Polish history. I want the grass to be cut, I want hedges trimmed and tombstones preserved in cooperation with the descendants of Jews buried there and the Polish Jewish community. I want each Polish town that once had a Jewish community to know about it and keep the memory of their former neighbors alive. Finally, I want Jewish visitors to Poland to feel welcome when they visit their ancestors' towns and say Kaddish at the ancestors' graves. Above all, I want them to form good, nurturing connections with contemporary residents and be as involved in the town's commemoration of the Jewish community as they want to be. I want us to be able to talk about the complexities, the difficulties of Polish Jewish history openly and frankly. I believe that the work of the forum contributes to making this wish a reality. I know this is a long-term or even a never-ending project, but one very much worth pursuing. It is on us, non-Jewish Poles, to ensure that the memory and heritage of Jews in Poland is kept alive. Today, on Yom Hashoah, it is important to remember, and I am grateful to be part of this commemoration and remember with you here today. Thank you.
We're going to now sing Eli, Eli. We'll call on Cantor Meredith Stone from Emanu-el, and you can find it in your pamphlet.
The sand and the sea. My father, Beryl Weinreb, was a Holocaust survivor from Vilna, Lithuania. He escaped from the Vilna ghetto in September 1943, fought with the partisans, joined the Russian army for a year, spent time in a DP camp in Germany, and eventually arrived in America on July 17, 1947. He started a new life here, founded a successful clothing manufacturing company, and raised a beautiful family. He passed away suddenly in 1994. Thankfully, my father was able to talk about much of what transpired, and I've had the privilege of sharing some of his stories with our congregations at our Yom Hashoah services during these past 24 years. About 20 years ago, I came across roughly 30 handwritten pages in Yiddish, but the dates of them indicated these were personal writings or stories of my father's. 3 years ago, I had them translated, including a page that he wrote on the boat the day before arriving in America. Tonight, I would like to read you an abridged and slightly paraphrased, but first-hand account of the day the Vilna Ghetto was created. September 6, 1941, the day that we were herded into the ghetto, a date which, as long as I live, I will never forget. At 7 a.m., as usual, a group of us met to go to work, as a Jew was not allowed to walk on the streets by himself. But Lithuanian police stop us and force us back home, telling us today you are going to the ghetto, a word we knew but did not really understand. Some people are unable to carry things. Lithuanian police start to chase and hit them. I organized with a friend of mine to fix the bundle that people carry, but the police noticed this and chased us away. I returned home and found out which streets the Jewish population was assigned to, and there will be made the ghetto. We have to pack but don't know what to take. The police give us 10 minutes to pack. Women are crying. The children look at them and they start crying too. One gets confused observing this picture. A person works all his life for someone else, often going hungry to buy something for the house, and now we have to abandon everything, not knowing where we are going. You can take only what you can carry. But people thought we were going to the ghetto for a few days. The Red Army, the Russians, will return and we can return home. Our house lady hid everything in the closet, locked the closet, and took the keys. Others hide things in their attics and lock their houses. The Gentiles are roaming the courtyards like wolves, what to rob. Others are so blunt they go inside the home, saying, "You don't need anything anymore. We are staying. Give it to us." I chase them away. I cannot look at them. All of a sudden, there appears a group of locals, and like animals, they start to yell, not allowing people to take anything. But my mother and I were prepared. We hid the better things in the attic and took small bundles with the basic necessities, and we are on our way. Walking in the middle of the road, heads down, surrounded by police, like criminals. Germans are taking pictures. Others are laughing. It seems the war is only for the Jews. We see a Jew who fainted after Lithuanians beat him. He is lying in a puddle of blood. We want to take him with us, but we are not allowed. Arriving at Rudnicki Street, we see two Gentiles constructing a wooden gate, a gate for the ghetto. There were no residents in the houses in the ghetto. Several days earlier, we learned, these people had been let out and shot at Panari. The Lithuanian police are pushing, beating, to hurry up and enter into the ghetto area. We hurriedly enter Rudnicki Street. There are already so many people at the courtyard, together with their bundles. Many, as they were running, get lost or disoriented and are trying to find the lost ones, a situation that I'm not able to describe or write about. It seems I need to organize a place for my mother and I to sleep. I am searching for a pole or stick to break a window because the entrance is nailed up. We spread our bundles on the floor, exhausted and drained from the day's stress, awaiting the unknown tomorrow. In July 1993, I went with my father to Vilna on a survivor second-generation expedition. He and I walked from the building he and his mother lived in before the ghetto, down the same street they had walked on, and then we stopped at the corner. He pointed down and to the left, saying that was the closer of what then became one of the two ghettos. But they didn't go that way. Instead, they went down and to the right, and a little further away. He said the ghetto to the left was liquidated, everyone killed, a few days later. He shrugged and said, "We were lucky we went to the right." But his mother, Clara, didn't survive. She was killed when the Germans liquidated the last of the Vilna Jews in July 44, 3 days before the Russians liberated the city. I mentioned earlier that my father came to America, his boat arriving on July 17th, 1947. Every year, on July 17th, I would call and say to my father, "Welcome to America, Beryla." As it turned out, this past July 17th, I became a grandfather. And my first granddaughter, who was born that very day, is named Clara, named after her great-great-grandmother, my father's mother.
Hi, everyone. The following song, Zog Nit Kein Mal, is known as the Partisan Hymn. The partisans had escaped or joined from various places and were the underground fighters against the Nazis. The Partisan Hymn was written by Hirsch Glick, a good friend of my grandfather. His request was that if he should not survive, like a burning torch, the song should continue from generation to generation. It was sung in every concentration camp, in every ghetto, by Jewish soldiers on the front, and after the war, it became the hymn of the Holocaust survivors. Hirsch Glick was arrested by the Germans and was sent to a concentration camp in Estonia, where he was killed in 1944. He was 23 years old. Hirsch Glick did not survive, but his partisan hymn did. Thank you.
Sag nicht keinmal, als du gehst im letzten Weg, wenn Himmeln bleine verstellen Leute, weil kommen wird noch unser Hausgebänkte Show. Es wird ab heute an unser Trott mir seinen da. Kommen wird noch unser Hausgebänkte Show. Es wird ab heute an unser Trott mir seinen da. Von grünem Palmenland bis weiten Land von Schnee. Wir seien da mit unserer Pein, mit unserer Weh. Und wo gefallen sie, so spritzt von unser Blut. Wetter sprotzt von unserer Gwure, unserer Mut. Und wo gefallen sie, so spritzt von unser Blut. Wetter sprotzt von unserer Gwure, unserer Mut. So never say that you have reached your journey's end, that leaden clouds or heaven's blue above extend. Upon us yet will dawn the day we hold so dear. Our tramping footsteps will proclaim that we are here. Upon us yet will dawn the day we hold so dear. Our tramping footsteps will proclaim that we are here.
I'm going to call on Abby Grace Levi and Jaden Schwartz to sing the Beatles tune. And you do have this in your pamphlet. These words from the Beatles are a reminder to us that of all the things that fade, memories and love will not. And so we'll sing this together. You're all invited to join Jaden and Abby Grace.
places I'll remember all my life. Though some have changed, not forever, not for better. Some have gone, and some remain. All these places have their moments with lovers and friends. I still can recall. Some are dead and some are living. In my life, I've loved them all. But of all these friends and lovers, there is no one compares with you. And these memories lose their meaning when I think of love as something new. Though I'll never lose affection for people and things that went before. No, I'll often think about them. In my life, I love you more. Though I'll never lose affection for people and things that went before. I know I'll often think about them. In my life, I love you more. In my life, I've loved you more.
Jaden and Abby Grace continue to bless us with their talents, with their voices, with their presence. We're so fortunate to have them at our congregation. Earlier in the week, I was reviewing the remarks that I would share tonight, and then I got a notification on my phone this morning, something called Facebook Memories, which brings up memories from years past. And so if you click on a picture, you can see where you were on that particular day, at that particular time, in that particular year. And this is the photo that came up today on this day 7 years ago. I'll pan so you can all see it. If you're sitting in the, but we tried to make this as big as we could, but we're not Congress. We don't have access to those really big, easels. But this is the words "Arbeit macht frei" on the gates. That's me locked arm in arm with a bunch of with a Holocaust survivor and with other staff from the March of the Living trip that I took 7 years ago to Poland. So I tore up the remarks that I would share, and I wrote something new today. And so I'd like to talk to you about the time that I had lunch at Auschwitz. We walked for what felt like an eternity. Our feet were tired. We were cold. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees from the morning, and the ground was wet as it had rained for hours. We could feel the water penetrating our shoes with each step, making it harder and harder to move. Frances, the 89-year-old Holocaust survivor, marched triumphantly through the gates where she paused to look up at the sign, "Arbeit macht frei." Hard work will set you free. She said nothing, kept walking with a sense of purpose. She didn't complain. The 200 students and staff from Miami, together with almost 15,000 Jews and non-Jews from all over the world, made their way through the gates. We walked along the pebbles and the earth, passing barracks still numbered on the outside. And then Frances stopped. "My Blumele," she cried out. "My Blumele." And we all watched as a tear began to roll down her cheek. She began to wobble and became unsteady on her feet, and quickly a group of staff from our trip rushed to her aid, and she just put her hands out like this, shooing them away. "No," she said. "I stand here. I stand right here alone. And then she pointed to the barracks, number 9. "This is it," she said. "This is where they shot my sister Blumele." I looked around and I saw teenagers and adults tired from walking, cold from the dropping temperatures, sitting on the ground. Some of them leaning against the barracks for support, some of them leaning on each other. And there was Frances, the 89-year-old Holocaust survivor, confronting painful memories, standing there alone. She slowly motioned for those on our trip to come a little closer, and of course we all did. "My children," she said, "my dear, dear children, you must always remember the truth. You must always tell the truth. My children, dear children," she kept repeating that phrase throughout our trip, "my dear, dear children. It is up to you now." And then, as if nothing happened, she just started walking and left us all there in amazement. Later in the day, after we had toured the concentration camp, we found a grassy area near the entrance, near that sign. That sign, perhaps the greatest lie ever told: "Hard work will set you free." We opened up our big black garbage bags filled with pre-wrapped sandwiches. Some of us couldn't eat at all, but Frances demanded that we eat. "Eat," she said. "Eat for truth. Eat for the future. Eat so that your children will know." And so, that day, we ate lunch at Auschwitz. And as we performed this sacred act of nourishing our bodies in a place that had stripped humans of their dignity, this place that had malnourished so many, we just gazed at the trees that surrounded us, trees that had soaked up human blood, grass that had devoured human remains, this place that was now a beacon of hope, a breeding ground for the perpetuation of truth, a place where Jews and non-Jews revisited painful memories, but created new, powerful, meaningful, and sacred memories. Later that evening, after we'd had the opportunity to dry off, shower, and change, we met in the lobby of the hotel for Ma'ariv, the evening prayer service. And in the Amidah, which is the central prayer of the evening service, I remember pausing at the paragraph that reads, "Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu ba'amcha Yisrael," a prayer that asks God to restore mercy, a prayer that precipitates the giving of thanks for the many blessings we enjoy in our lives, a prayer that is designed to acknowledge the hurt we feel and reconcile it with rachamim, with compassion, with mercy, with divine love that is eternal. So these words of Ritzei, which will now be sung by Abby Grace Levi and Jaden Schwartz, these words serve as a reminder for us that comfort manifests in many forms. Some of us are comforted by God's presence, others by the liturgy of our faith, but all of us can be comforted when we surround ourselves with the people who mean the most to us. So let us on this Yom HaShoah remember those who no longer walk this earth, but whose legacy we carry. Let us resolve to love stronger, to offer prayers without precondition, and to devote ourselves to that which matters most: our family, our friends, and our faith. Please join Jaden and Abby Grace in the singing of Ritzei in your pamphlet.
Say Adonai Eloheinu be'amecha Yisrael u'tefilatam be'ahava techabel u'tehileh ratzon tamid avodat Yisrael
invite us to rise for El Malei Rachamim, the memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein b'mromim, Hamitzei menucha nechona tachat kanefei hashchina, במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים לנשמות כל אחינו בני ישראל שנטבחו בשואה, אנשים נשים וטף, שנחנקו ושנשרפו ושנהרגו, שמסרו את נפשם בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם. אנא בעל הרחמים, הסתירם בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, ואנוכו ושלום על משכבותיהם, ונאמר Amen. I invite us to remain standing for the mourner's Kaddish, which we'll say together, and I'll invite us as to repeat after me. I'll say the Aramaic words, and then we can all read the names of the ghettos, which can be found in the transliteration in your pamphlet after the El Malei Rachamim prayer. I recognize that the papers are not numbered, but it should look like this, and you'll see the mourner's Kaddish there. Yit Kadal, V'yit Kadash, Shemei Rabbah, Be'alma Divra Kirutei, V'yamlich Malchutei, V'chayechon U'v'yom Echon, V'chayeh Dechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala U'v'zman Kariv, V'yimru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevorach, Li'olam Li'omei Almaya, Yitbarach V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar V'yitromam, V'yitnasei V'yitadar, V'yit'aleh V'yithalal, Shemei Dekudesha B'richu, Le'ela Mikol Birchata V'shirata, Tushbechata V'nechemata, Damiran Be'alma, V'yimru Amen. Together, Yehei Shlama Rabbah Min Shemaya, V'chaim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, V'yimru Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimromav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, V'yimru Amen. We may be seated. Again, I'll invite us all to sing together the words of Yerushalayim Shel Zahav.
צלול קיין וריח אורנים נישא ברוח הארבעים עם כל פעמונים ובתרדמת אילן ואבן שבויה בחלומה העיר אשר בדד יושבת היום לשיר לך ולך לקשור כתרים. קטונתי מצעיר בנייך ומאחרון המשוררים. כי שמך צורבת השפתיים כנשיקת שרף. אם אשכחך ירושלים אשר כולה זהב. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור. היו לכל שירייך אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור. היו לכל שירייך אני
When written in the late 19th century, the words of Hatikvah inspired hope. Later adopted as the national anthem of the State of Israel, its messages of homeland, safety, and self-determination resonated with Jews around the world. Since the Holocaust, whether we have found that hope here in America, in Israel, or in any land that has been welcoming to our people, tonight we sing these words with the hope that all Jews will always have safe haven in lands of freedom, opportunity, and peace. Please rise.
Invite us to remain standing as the Torahs are processed.